So it seems like CoinLab just can't catch a break. In the time since we last checked in with them, CoinLab was partnering with Mt. Gox, and then there were a series of lawsuits and countersuits, essentially because the regulatory environment changed a couple of days before the contractual regulatory requirement was due. And so because of that, because there was so little time in order to get back into compliance with the new requirements, then they were in breach of contract, and there's a lot of nonsense going back and forth on that. What's happened now is that after pivoting away from trying to be Mt. Gox's U.S. arm of operations, they essentially got into the accelerator or incubator space. Their first spinoff was called Allidian, which was a company that was aiming to essentially allow users to buy mining rigs and host them at an offsite facility. It has declared bankruptcy, is very much so in debt, and seems to have been a pretty massive loss for CoinLab.
This is a typical kind of Silicon Valley thing where it's an old style startup with a lot of VC type funding from various sources in the millions and very little in tech innovation underpinning it.
This was one of those, we've been talking about ASIC mining a lot, and this was one of those projects that was aiming to have essentially a plug and play solution where you essentially just plug in the box, plug it into to an Ethernet cord, into power, and pretty much you're done. It's running and it can operate. You don't actually need to have any technical expertise. Could that have had this problem, or is this just CoinLab?
I mean, yeah, sure. You can solve that problem. I mean, the question we really need to ask ourselves at this point in the Bitcoin ecosystem, do we need to be building businesses that have millions of dollars in venture capital funding? And I think that model is really broken and is the old model for doing businesses. And there's so much opportunity for innovation on the blockchain. What we don't need is innovation in fundraising schemes and lawsuits, which seems to be, by the way, the main business plan of CoinLab is partnerships, mergers and acquisitions, and lawsuits. I so far have not seen a single piece of technology come out of that company after almost 2 years, and yet its leader is the head of the Bitcoin Foundation. It's kind of bizarre.
So might this be sort of a horrible warning to traditional kind of VCs that this model may not be working in the Bitcoin space, and will this deter them from maybe funding other companies? And is that a good or a bad thing?
I think the risks in the regulatory environment are clear for anyone to see. VCs who try to play this game need to be ready for massive losses. The only question is this a good business for Bitcoin? And that's the question I'm most interested in, is do these types of businesses really add value to the Bitcoin environment and network? And I would say some do, some really don't. They're just corporate shell games that have nothing to do with innovation on the blockchain.
This would have been better for CoinLab if they had just invested the funds into Bitcoin itself, of course, because this is a bankruptcy. But even so, even if they had won, they must have been looking for like a 10 times, 100 times, something like that multiplier from their investment if they're going to be putting that in instead of Bitcoin. This is, of course, another question is, since this bankruptcy has come to light, the price of Bitcoin has skyrocketed. I wonder if maybe Bitcoin was $150 higher at the time that they were looking at declaring bankruptcy, if they would have been, because ultimately ASIC mining is as profitable as the exchange rate, right?
That's a very good point. So what we're saying really is that they created a business that was very, very, very heavily exposed to the volatility in the currency. Well, there you go. That's one of the reasons why it went down.
Actually, Adam, I would say ASIC mining is less profitable than the exchange rate, because still you have to invest all this money in the hardware, and you've got to maintain it, and you got to make sure it's running, and you got to power it. So yeah, it's not even as simple as the exchange rate. It's like you're already starting off at a disadvantage and have to recoup some costs before making any kind of a profit.
My point was that if you're earning with mining, you're earning a fixed amount of Bitcoin based on your hashing power compared to the rest of the network. But if that Bitcoin is worth $1 per Bitcoin, then obviously there's a lot less profit in it than if it's worth $500 per Bitcoin. That was my point, is that the exchange rate has a huge impact on how profitable mining is, assuming you are mining to sell.
Well, here's the bottom line. I think if you look at mining with a sober analytical perspective, mining should not be profitable, not over the long term. Why? Because it's an almost perfect market. The barriers to entry are not that high. The technology used is commoditized for the most part, or rapidly becoming so. And the difficulty is self-adjusting. It's designed to remove profits, and an efficient market should work like that. If you're offering something that has little differentiation or value add over everybody else and anyone can enter the market, then your profit margin will approach zero asymptotically as you stay longer in the market. So yeah, mining should never be profitable. That's how it works.
Well, mining shouldn't eventually be profitable, but I think saying it should never be profitable.
So over the long term and as an entire industry, what mining offers is the opportunity to gain some advantage by being an early adopter. But over the long term and as an entire industry, it will be barely profitable. Right. And that's right. That's how the market should reach an equilibrium where it really reflects the value of the service and the difficulties of getting into it.
Right. You get no disagreement from me on that. But again, it's that core middle part, right? Because we had the beginning. I would argue that, the very, very beginning was the wild gold rush days, and obviously we've kind of seen that come to fruition where the people who were involved at that point have become the people who are, major players in the space and generally quite wealthy. So I understand that, at the end of this, you have that. But for me, it's like the ASIC question too, right? So the ASIC end game is that there are tiny ASICs in every water heater, car, cell phone, everything that does everything. And I can see that. And that indeed would be something, where it's like basically break even because the hardware is completely pervasive and absolutely everywhere. But I don't see how you get from where we are now with the couple of ASIC manufacturers competing wildly against each other to that place without a crazy amount of profit being made by someone during the interim.
Well, no, it's not going to be a crazy amount of profit unless you do it at volume. So basically, this market is now going to favor those who can bring to wield like very, very large economies of scale. So ASIC mining will be profitable, but only at very large scales. If you can put down a data center near hydro or near solar or near some other source of electricity that's extremely cheap and you can cram it with ASICs that you can get actually delivered to that data center, you're going to make a profit. But inherently that's going to be limited only to those who can bring to bear the scale that's required. And that's fine. Markets shouldn't be ridiculously profitable over time, especially if they're not very heavily differentiated. This is a challenge for everyone entering the Bitcoin market, which is at this point in the growth, very few things are innovative and value-giving enough to be better than simply putting your money into Bitcoin and holding.
Hi, this is Jason King, founder at Sean's Outpost, and you are listening to Let's Talk Bitcoin. Sean's Outpost is a homeless outreach in Pensacola, Florida, and we are proudly powered by Bitcoin. To date, over 13,000 meals have been fed to the homeless in our area, all purchased with Bitcoin and through the generosity of the cryptocurrency community. Read more about us at seansoutpost.com. Food, shelter, Bitcoin, everybody. Sean'sOutpost.com.